In a massive wave of public demonstrations, millions of Americans have taken to the streets under the slogan "No Kings." The movement, which began earlier this week, is spreading rapidly across major U.S. cities, including New York, Seattle, Atlanta, and Phoenix, as well as hundreds of smaller towns and college campuses. Protesters say they are rallying to defend democratic values and reject what they see as a growing concentration of power in American politics. The slogan "No Kings" refers to a warning that no individual, regardless of office or influence, should stand above the law. Organizers described the protest as a nonpartisan call for accountability and a defense of constitutional checks and balances. Crowds can be seen holding signs reading "We serve the Constitution, not a king," and "Democracy means limits on power." The movement gained momentum following controversial statements by former President Donald Trump, who recently claimed he should have total immunity from prosecution for actions taken while in office. Critics say that statement triggered widespread concern about the future of presidential power. Social media has been a driving force behind the protests. Within 48 hours, hashtags #NoKings and #DefendDemocracy trended globally, with millions of posts and video clips showing massive peaceful gatherings across the country. In several cities, crowds sang patriotic songs while waving American flags and copies of the U.S. Constitution. Local authorities report that most demonstrations have remained peaceful, with only minor incidents of property damage or brief clashes between small groups. In Los Angeles and Washington, D.C., police officers marched alongside citizens in a show of restraint and solidarity. Despite differing political views, protesters say they share one common message: that democracy requires limits, transparency, and accountability. One marcher in Chicago told NationCast Now, "We don't hate politicians, we just don't want a king." Experts say the movement's scale and coordination make it one of the largest public demonstrations in recent U.S. history, comparable to the Women's March of 2017 and the Black Lives Matter protests of 2020. But unlike those movements, No Kings is not about one policy or one party. It's about a principle: that power, left unchecked, threatens freedom itself. Reporting from Washington, this is NationCast Now. The No Kings protests have drawn strong reactions across the political spectrum. While many citizens view it as a peaceful stand for democracy, others see it as an organized political effort to undermine authority. Conservative commentators have called the demonstrations coordinated theater, accusing organizers of exaggerating threats to democracy. Meanwhile, progressive leaders have praised the rallies as a reminder that public accountability is not rebellion. In several cities, political tensions flared online more than on the ground. Dozens of viral clips, some authentic, others digitally altered, circulated on platforms like X, TikTok, and YouTube, fueling confusion about crowd sizes and incidents. Fact-checkers have since debunked multiple false claims linked to the protests. Despite attempts to politicize the movement, interviews with protesters show broad diversity among participants. They include conservatives, independents, and moderate Democrats, many emphasizing that their stand is not against a person, but against the idea of unchecked authority. Legal analysts note that the protest reflects deeper anxiety about recent court rulings on presidential immunity and the limits of executive power. Some fear these developments could set dangerous precedents if left unchallenged. In Atlanta, hundreds of veterans joined the march, carrying signs that read, "We fought kings before, we'll do it again." In Seattle, college students led a peaceful candlelight vigil for what they called the preservation of American democracy. Political observers say the protest tone, firm but peaceful, has surprised many. Despite record turnout, there have been few reports of violence or arrests. Police departments in at least a dozen cities have praised organizers for their cooperation and crowd management. Still, the demonstrations have deepened divisions in Congress. Republican lawmakers accuse the movement of stoking unrest. Democrats counter that peaceful assembly is a constitutional right, and that silence, in the face of potential overreach, would be far more dangerous. Civil rights groups are now urging Americans to stay engaged beyond the protests by voting, volunteering, and supporting civic education. They argue that No Kings must evolve from a street slogan into a sustained movement for accountability. Reporting from Atlanta, this is NationCast Now. The federal and state governments have responded cautiously to the growing No Kings movement. Officials have praised the protesters' right to free speech while emphasizing the need to maintain order and public safety. In Washington, the White House released a brief statement calling the demonstrations a reflection of America's democratic spirit. However, former President Trump's spokesperson described the protests as a media-driven stunt, claiming they are being used to undermine legitimate authority. The Department of Justice has confirmed it is monitoring the situation to ensure that all constitutional rights, including the right to assemble, are protected. So far, there are no indications of federal intervention or any restrictions on peaceful gatherings. Governors in several states have echoed similar sentiments. In California, Governor Gavin Newsom praised the peaceful nature of the marches. In Florida, Governor Ron DeSantis criticized the movement, calling it political theater disguised as patriotism. Security analysts say the protests represent a new form of civic mobilization, decentralized, tech-driven, and largely self-organized. They note that the use of live streams, drone footage, and real-time coordination has made it difficult for traditional authorities to control narratives. Meanwhile, polling data released this morning shows that 62% of Americans support the protesters' right to demonstrate, while 48% agree with their message that no public official should be above the law. Experts warn that how the government responds now could shape public trust for years to come. A respectful, transparent approach could strengthen faith in democracy. Any hint of suppression, they say, could have the opposite effect. As protests continue into the weekend, the chants remain steady, calm, disciplined, and resolute. No kings, only the people. From Washington, D.C., this is NationCast Now, bringing you facts without fear and news without noise.